ReviewTyme is the home for all things theme parks. Stay up to date with our content by subscribing and turning on notifications. We all make mistakes. It's a part of life and we simply can't avoid them. On Disneyland's opening day, the Mark Twain Riverboat sank, which is a fairly big mistake. The boat usually made its way around the rivers of America on a guide rail, but the boat had slipped off the track and into the mud, causing it to take on water, because there were simply too many people on board. Terry O'Brien, a former Disneyland cast member, mentioned that it took about 30 minutes to get the issue fixed, and as the boat came back to the station, all the guests on board rushed to the exit, which caused it to sink again. Guests now had to wade through water to exit the attraction, which made some of them understandably a bit upset. His boss came along and asked how many people he let on, to which Terry mentioned that it was around 250. His boss said he better keep it to 200 and left. But afterwards, he remembered that he had a clicker in his pocket. He pulled it out and was shocked to notice that he had actually let on 508 people. He never told anybody, and it never happened again. This mistake cost Disney at most a few angry customers and for guests a bunch of waterlogged pants. Thankfully, it was nowhere near the billions and billions of dollars it would cost Disney when making the mistake that was Disney's California Adventure Park, a project so misguided and poorly managed that it fumbled its way into popular culture as one of the worst theme parks that Disney had ever created at the time. But there was no single mistake that led to DCA. Instead, it was a series of blunders that started with its history. Disney were adamant on providing a second theme park near Disneyland to replicate the flourishing financial success of Walt Disney World as an isolated Disney resort destination. The problem was that Disneyland had a Disneyland problem, and whilst Walt Disney World was surrounded by swamps and alligators, Disneyland was surrounded by residential districts and businesses, which are significantly more illegal to bulldoze. A possible solution appeared in 1990 when Walt Disney Theme Parks, under the guidance of Big Cheese in Denial Michael Eisner,
The big cheese? I'm not the big. I wish I was the big cheese. This is the big cheese. Oh!
unveiled Port Disney at Long Beach, California, as part of the Disney Decade, which would include a theme park known as Disneysea. Today, it stands as one of the greatest theme parks Disney has ever built, though sadly as a completely different park in a completely different continent, as plans were seized in 1991 due to California's Disneysea being underdeveloped, and was instead revamped to become Tokyo Disneysea in 2001, which is regarded as one of the greatest theme parks in the world. After this cancellation, Walt Disney theme parks turned to a closer plot of land known as the Disneyland Parking Lot, and pursued an idea called Westcott, which was designed to serve as a West Coast version of Walt Disney World's Epcot, themed around a utopian vision of the future, with pavilions for many different countries from around the world to showcase their culture. Whilst the concept was grand, so too were the complications. Westcott would require significant land acquisitions, and as Disney would purchase land, prices would skyrocket. Residents weren't fond of the idea either, complaining that the new park would significantly increase the resort's light pollution, and that the park's version of Spaceship Earth would become an eyesore. The final nail in the coffin came with the estimated cost of Westcott being just shy of $3 billion US. With the company already experiencing financial problems thanks to a blundering Euro Disneyland, the project just wasn't feasible for the Walt Disney Company at the time, and the project was officially scrapped in 1995. Just like how caterpillars are destined to transform into butterflies, so too are Disneyland parking lots destined to transform into theme parks, and Big Cheese Michael Eisner wasn't about to end this natural cycle. He assembled 30 of Disney's top executives for a 3-day retreat in Colorado to come up with a new idea for the plot of land, and after several days it was decided that Disney's next venture would be to create a California-themed theme park in the middle of California. Construction started in 1998, and the Disneyland Parking Lot quickly became not a Disneyland parking lot. It became so much of not a Disneyland parking lot that in February of 2001, Disney's California Adventure Park opened to the public and received such praise as Disney legend John Hench saying, "I liked it better as a parking lot." The park was a failure. In 2001, its opening year, it saw just 5 million people through its gates, whilst Disneyland, literally 100 steps away, saw 12.3 million people during the same time period. Embarrassingly, this seemed to have been unexpected with Disney. An article from the Los Angeles Times before the park opened stated, "Senior Disney officials acknowledge that there will be days when California Adventure will have to turn patrons away, particularly in the first weeks after the park opens, during spring break, and again in the summer," which turned out to be not a problem at all. Disney even had plans to add further attractions to Disneyland to entice guests back in because they were worried that most guests would spend a majority of their time at DCA. This attraction eventually became Tower of Terror and was put at DCA because they couldn't get people out of Disneyland.
I can't believe this. Hey! Can you tell me where the pool is? Can you tell me where the gift shop is? Can you tell me where the other guests are? Can you tell me where you are?
So why was Disney's California Adventure so poorly received, and how did it lead to it costing them billions of dollars? Well, the first mistake came from expectation. Westcott was cancelled, but executives still wanted an Epcot-like experience with its adult atmosphere and plentiful restaurants, so instead of using Imagineers to create DCA, Disneyland president Paul Pressler relied on retail and merchandising staff to get the job done, which is reflected in the opening day lineup of 22 attractions with 15 restaurants. The problem is that Epcot works because of its setting. The different cultures gives an obvious reason for a vast amount of restaurants, and it's clearly advertised that if you visit Germany, you're going to get German cuisine. But what cuisine and expectation comes from California? Clearly there weren't going to be 15 In-N-Outs in the park, but guests simply didn't have a reason to go and discover what California had to offer in terms of food. That lack of faith in Imagineers is again another mistake that Disney fell into. Likely the justification for this was that the Imagineers got them into this problem in the first place with their wildly excessive plans for Westcott, but that's their job. The idea behind their concepts is to provide a best possible outcome, and then through management you end up refining their creations to create something more realistic and manageable. Disney were obsessed with creating a second park for Disneyland to chase the financial outcomes of Walt Disney World. But after Euro Disneyland's failure, they simply didn't have the funds to create a fully featured theme park. Low budgets and rushed deadlines meant that the few Imagineers which were able to design for DCA were often solely focused on making their attractions work, with little room for collaboration and brainstorming. This made Imagineers possessive and territorial, and allowed for projects such as the abysmal Superstar Limo to fly under the radar, because it was only once they had finished and had a chance to reflect that they realized they invested all of their energy into something that was just simply bad and was never going to work. The theme was also a mistake. The idea was that California Adventure was meant to be Disney's substitute for visiting California. In the minds of the executives, they believed that guests would spend longer at the Disneyland Resort with DCA because they'd need less time to visit California, which on paper makes sense. But practically, it just doesn't. Firstly, if you're an international or domestic traveler who has already visited most of California, then that already makes your theme park redundant. Secondly, local guests and pass holders make up a significant portion of visitation for the Disneyland Resort. And guess where they live? California. Adding to the problem was a lack of family rides to entice Disneyland visitors over to the park, and even those who were convinced to come over were treated to a rather lousy experience. The Hollywood backlot lacked focus with an attraction that was nightmarish, off-the-shelf attractions were peppered all over the park and lacked Disney's signature creativity. The huge emphasis on stores and restaurants instead of attractions was detracting, and the park omitted having a separating berm around its perimeter, allowing the local Anaheim skyline to leak into the theme park, which didn't allow for any suspension of disbelief. It honestly felt like Disney forgot how to design a Disney theme park and refused to look at their immensely successful sister park for inspiration. They wanted to do something radically different, and they got crowd attendance that was radically different, but in the opposite direction. In 2005, Michael Eisner stepped down as the big cheese of the Walt Disney Company and was succeeded by Bob Iger, who changed the title to CEO. Iger recognized the poor state of DCA immediately and reflected that its presence detracted from the overall Disney brand experience. In 2007, the Walt Disney Company announced a $1.1 billion redesign and expansion to Disney's California Adventure Park, which was just under double the original cost of the park at $600 million. Instead of serving as a caricature of California, the park would instead reflect a romanticized version of the state, exploring specific time periods and historical settings. The park's name was also updated to an unrecognizable Disney California Adventure, with many people being confused as to whether it was the same theme park, but rest assured after years of research, we think it's possible that it is. Iger was destined to make the updated park a more Disney experience, and that started with the opening land being changed from a giant mural postcard to an idealized version of Los Angeles that Walt Disney arrived in for the first time in 1920. Cars Land was introduced to cater to families and provide a recognizable product to bring people through the gates, and World of Color was added as the park's nighttime spectacular to ensure that guests had a reason to stay in the park after sundown and utilize the many restaurants that DCA contained. In later years, the area around Soaring has been extensively upgraded, and Paradise Pier has seen numerous facelifts and changes. One by one, remnants of the original park have been slowly picked out and replaced with a more Disney experience that reflects the quality of a brand that charges $3.50 for bottled water. Disney California Adventure is a testament to the ideology that if you're going to do something, do it right. You shouldn't have to pay $1.1 billion to entice guests into your $600 million theme park, and considering that changes continue to this day to bring the park up to par, I'd say we're never likely to get a definite cost for this mistake. But it could have easily been avoided if Disney stopped pinching pennies and instead pinched the pioneering ideas that Disney was known for. DCA can be regarded as one of the most expensive theme park flops for the Disney company. That is, until they opened the Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris. But that's a story for another day. From the home for all things theme parks, I'm Dominic from ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching.